Alright YouTube, it's time for occult video number 16. I wanted to cover this topic earlier but didn't. A lot of the points that I'll make will probably sound similar to my views on cryptids, and that is the subject of ghosts, poltergeists, everything associated with these things. In essence, the most simple way I can describe it is this. I believe that most individual stories of ghosts, either there's a ghost here or I saw a ghost here, are either hoaxes or misidentifications of mundane phenomena. I preface that on this. Let's say that there's a person and they walk into their house. The floorboards are creaky, they feel a draft, and a door locks itself because it's old and falling apart. Normally, a person will regard these things as mundane. They will fix the door, they will close the window causing the draft, they will take a look at their floorboards to make sure they're not being eaten by termites or something. If they are under stress, though, if they're under psychological stress, or if they've become sort of undone because they're doing a lot of paranormal research because they have a casual interest or something, then those same mundane phenomena that they would normally regard as mundane, they will take as paranormal. They will then get it into their heads that their house is haunted. They will then start seeing hauntings everywhere they look. They will see a face come out of the wall. They will see something in the corner of their eye and assume it's a ghost. And in their mind, they just build upon these things that they think and claim that they're seeing over time. It's the same way with haunted locations. We tend to regard the typical story of a haunting. We think of an old Victorian home or a castle or something, or a battlefield or an old factory. We think of somewhere where trauma has gone on, where people died. There was a criminal lived there at one point, now his spirit's back for revenge. A witch lived there, or a group of devil worshippers is active in the woods out back behind this home, so the whole property is full of demons. This is how we regard hauntings, generally speaking. Most of the time, the original story has been transmogrified such that the new version holds at most a kernel of truth, and the original story is far less fantastic than the story that is used to perpetuate sort of the myth of these things. From an occult perspective, it's even more complicated, though. If people generally believe that a place is haunted, regardless of whether it is or not, and they start going into this location and thinking, well, it's haunted, I'm seeing all these weird things, eventually you will have a sort of mythology generated out of the location, even if the original story was false, because you have a collective belief in it. It's just like, have you heard of Jerusalem syndrome? I think that's what it's called. It's a syndrome where people, especially Christians, they go to Israel as tourists, and at some point they basically lose their mind temporarily, and they start dressing in robes and pretending to be Jesus or a saint or something, and spouting all this religious dogma. And it's an understood psychological phenomenon. They have something similar for Paris, Tokyo, and all these other places. Because the psychology gets a rude awakening going to some place. The expectations and reality are totally different. The mind sort of goes undone a little bit for a while. This is the case with most large metropolitan areas with a lot of tourism, especially those of religious significance. It's the same way with a haunting. A person goes in presuming that it's haunted, truly believing that. They get all worked up, their blood pressure's high, they're full of hormones and full of adrenaline because they're just expecting something to jump out of a closet when they're moving through the area. When they get there and realize it's much more mundane than that, it sort of causes a little bit of loopiness in their brain. It's the same thing. And the original story does not have to be true, but then when you have all of these people congregating in an area, and they come back and they start talking on their blogs or websites, or they talk to their friends, or they write a book about or whatever, all the weird things that they saw or think they saw or felt or that manifested themselves to them, then it grows. It becomes more and more potent of a mythology. Unless it falls into disuse. You have a dozen different places in the United States that are just like this. Look at the story of the Bell Witch, or Zombie Road, or the Winchester Mansion, or any of these other things. It's the same thing. You have this sort of mythology that's been woven around a location or around it can be a person's grave, it can be a specific forest, a mountain. Glastonbury Mountain, right down in Bennington County here in Vermont, it's called the Bennington Triangle. It's actually a world famous paranormal destination because there have been quite a host of disappearances around this area. And there were native legends also, and this has just made it worse, really, because people say, well, even the natives talked about stones that would cause people to disappear and all sorts of demons and weird stuff on the mountain, and then people started disappearing. Now, let alone the fact that thousands of people every year hike all around Glastonbury Mountain without incidents. They go up the mountain, they come down the mountain, they're just fine, nothing happens to them. And you have five or six disappearances over the course of a couple of decades, and it spawns this mythology. That's a pretty low threshold when you consider that people disappear all the time in the woods. People disappear specifically because it's the wilderness. This mountain's in the middle of nowhere. For several miles in any direction, all there is tree. If you're under that tree line, you can walk around and around that mountain, think you're going in one direction. Unless you have a compass, you've got no clue. And if you go to the east, you can get all the way to the Connecticut River without meeting even a single road. So, yes, people get lost. People die in the woods and their bones have sediment deposited over them, or they get abducted, or ripped apart by a bear or something like that. And of course, you're not going to find any remains of them. And it spawned this elaborate mythology. You have the same thing in a lot of other places. Now, I do believe that some of these cases are compelling enough to say, yes, there may be something there. I don't necessarily say ghost. When people say ghost, usually they mean a sentient, ethereal being. Something that a soul, literally, that hasn't crossed over for some reason. It's capable of interacting with people. It's capable of being driven off, angered. It's capable of being pleased. It's capable of doing all sorts of things. A poltergeist can even move things without touching them, literally by telekinesis. I don't believe in these things. I believe that they're remnant energies that are essentially on replay until they exhaust themselves. Now, there are cases where there will be the occasional video that can't be explained as a hoax or as misidentification. There was one a couple of years ago at a gas station which quite clearly was not doctored. They took a look at it, it wasn't doctored. There were witnesses. Something weird goes across the camera. They're not sure what it was. But again, it could still be a hoax. Maybe somebody rigged up a laser display or a hologram of some sort. How do we know? There's no way for us to tell because we weren't there. That's the other thing. Unless you yourself have actually witnessed one of these things, you can't really speak on it much. You can go to a haunted house all you want, but until you meet the friendly ghost that's living inside, you can't make heads or tails of it. You're just making assumptions. Now, I have seen a ghost. When I was down in Florida, I did. I saw a disembodied something. It looked like a human from roughly the knee to the midriff or like the lower chest. Sort of glowing, obviously transparent, walked across the room. Gait looked like, quite literally, a pair of legs that just happened to have nothing below the knee or above the midriff. It was creepy. It was interesting. I definitely saw it. I had my glasses on at the time and I was sober, so I know it wasn't just a drug-fueled hallucination or something. But at the same time, do I claim, there are two claims that people make that I don't quite understand that I don't like to apply to my own sort of paranormal stuff. First, they'll claim that if you don't believe them, that there's something wrong with you, or you don't trust them, or you're just a horrible denialist of some sort. I don't do that because why would I expect somebody to believe me unless they saw it themselves? Because they would have no reason to. I might as well tell them I saw a unicorn. The only difference being more people happen to believe in ghosts than unicorns, I suppose. The same with religion. Really, some of these phenomena, yeah, maybe they're real. Other phenomena, no, I don't believe in, and I'm not going to until I actually see them. Another claim that they make is that these beings, these ghosts or whatever you want to term them, are automatically, they've got a mind of their own, they're sentient, they have feelings, we've got to try to talk to them. And they also claim that they've got all this weird gear that somehow they can tell that a ghost is there by magnetic fields. Well, every electrical appliance in your house generates an electromagnetic field. They even generate radiation that you can sense. There's electricity, there's light, there's heat sources, there's cold spots all around you at any given time. That doesn't mean that it's a ghost. Because you can walk into a home that was just created on a completely sterile piece of land. Nobody's ever lived there. Nobody's ever died there. Nothing has ever happened there, in the middle of nowhere. And you can walk in with this gear and you will eventually see an orb. It's a dust particle that's out of focus. You'll eventually see an orb. You'll eventually find a cold spot. You'll eventually find an animal bone under your foundation or something if you tear the house back up. You will eventually find these things. This doesn't indicate that there's a ghost there. It's like these sort of like paranormal shows. They're always trying to talk to these spirits. It's almost always in English too, even if they happen to be in Germany or France at the time. It's like, yeah, some German ghost from 1,000 years ago in a Gallic fort or something is going to speak to you in English and understand it. This makes no sense whatsoever. They have these little meters and things, that they dowsing rods and all this easily refuted nonsense that they supposedly go after them with. And that's all entertainment. This is quite literally the Hollywoodization of the paranormal. You have to go back a good 50 years to find people that were actually skilled in talking about these things from a philosophical angle. You're going all the way back to the Theosophists in the Victorian era if you want to find people that really understand them. Most of the modern stuff completely misses the mark because it either ascribes sentience or it goes off into really weird, unproven theoretical physics that I don't even want to study because it's so difficult to comprehend and so easily intertwined with a million different spiritual systems. Or it does some other bullshit and it just generally misses the mark. I think all the ghost hunter stuff, the sort of haunted house feel of the stuff that you're going to see on TV or in a movie, no, most of that is not real. It's like Ouija boards. People keep telling me, I got possessed by a Ouija board. The Ouija board moved on its own. My friend called forth a spirit with the Ouija board. No, he didn't. No, you didn't. The Ouija board is a board game. It has absolutely no paranormal capabilities whatsoever. The fact that people continue to believe that they cause possession or ghosts to materialize or psychic phenomena shows that The Exorcist was a really good movie, because that's really where it begins. In the 1970s, before that, you don't really have this general sense of the Ouija board caused A, B, and C. It was a parlor game. It was understood to be one. You might as well talk about Kreskin's little crystal thing there with the pendulum causing possession. No, it doesn't. It's a board game. And that's all it is. Likewise with ghosts, we have to sort of be adults about this. I like a good spook story, and I believe that some of these manifestations, I am sure, there are far too many unexplained phenomena in this world for me to say that all of them are fake, or that all of them are hoaxes. I'm sure if you really studied the world, if you had 1,000 years to do it, and you could be everywhere at once, eventually you'd see a genuine case of some weird haunting that you can't quite explain. It has something to do with a portal on some other dimension, or something else within theoretical physics, or some energy of some kind, some vibration, some weird cosmic alignment just happens to cause something like that. I am sure that you would eventually find genuine cases thereof. But I can't be in the hundreds of thousands or millions of different locations that are judged to be paranormal and important for the paranormal. As such, at most in my lifetime, if I were to go to a couple places a day, I could investigate some of these locations. Even then, not in any depth. So how can I honestly say that all of them are hoaxes or all of them are real? I think the danger is this. Most skeptics say that they're all bunk. There are no ghosts, there is no occult, there are no fairies, there are no gnomes, there's no anything. Anything spiritual or out of the ordinary in any way is absolute bunk, including, by the way, science is yet not quite defined. Theoretical physics is nonsense, and if they had been living 1,000 years ago, they would probably say that chemistry is nonsense, or at the time they would have said evolution is nonsense, because let's face it, science continues to grow. Or they accept all of these things blindly, and you have to hit them with absolutely incontrovertible evidence to convince them that a place isn't haunted, because they see witches and demons and ghosts everywhere. I think these people are just as closed-minded as the first group of people. They see all of these things everywhere that they go. Their school's haunted, their place of work is haunted, their house and their neighbor's house is haunted, the graveyard's haunted, the forest that nearby is haunted, even the road's haunted, their toilet's haunted. and you hear them rant on and on about all the dozens of ghosts and UFOs and little green men and elves that they see on a regular basis, naturally you're going to presume, if you're somewhat skeptical at all, that they're out of their minds. I think the main thing holding back most paranormal research is a combination of people that are unwilling to believe that it could possibly have any reality, and people who are unwilling to believe that there's any such thing as a hoax when you're talking about their favorite cryptid or their favorite haunting story, because they look like lunatics to the average person. The people in the middle that are neither completely against or for it look at both groups and say these people have a few screws loose. They don't quite make enough sense. And so they sort of straddle the fence. But no, I believe that some of these things are legitimate. But I don't believe they're sentient. Or at least generally speaking, I don't believe that they're sentient. That is, they don't have their own will. They don't have their own mind, really, generally speaking. That's one belief I have. And the other thing is, yes, a lot of them are hoaxes or the result of somebody sees something strange, they make a story out of it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a little bit like the hoop snake. As a final word, I'll talk about the hoop snake here for a sec. It's a joke. It's a cryptid that doesn't exist. Nobody ever truly believed it existed. It was made up by frontiersmen sort of exploring the Americas in the early period of colonization. They got the idea that it would be funny, essentially, to prank the people that were pouring in continuously from other places and seeking work. So they developed sort of a lumberjack's campfire story about this snake that would roll itself up into a hoop. It would roll down the hill at you and lunge at you and essentially bite you and kill you. It never existed. Nobody ever truly believed it existed until people started taking it seriously because they didn't have any idea about the flora and fauna of the Americas. And so there were actually people probably going through the woods searching for these snakes that never existed. Now, this is a little bit different from the idea of like raining frogs or the tassel worm or any of a million other things from the old world that do appear to actually happen. There actually have been times when it rains fish for no reason. I don't pretend to know why. This sort of weird weather has happened. You know, you get a black hail or orange snow or something like that, and everyone's mystified and can never find a cause. That's pretty creepy. That's more creepy than most of the ghost stories in existence. But yes, you can have a situation where a story that's understood not to be true gets embellished upon later and taken seriously. I think if you looked through all of the major hauntings in the world, you'd find probably a fairly large proportion of them fit the bill. That is, that the original story was either misconstrued, only a kernel of the original story remains true to form, or it was understood to be sort of the campfire side story, sort of the spook story that you tell little children, like Bloody Mary or something like that. It's a spook story. It's a jump story that's meant to frighten people. It's sort of like a game, but there are people that take it seriously. They take it seriously because they don't know any better. They get introduced to it as kids, and they see the story and they say, wow, that sounds crazy. And so they do spin around the mirror chanting Bloody Mary, and then they see something out of the corner of their eye. It absolutely terrifies them. They tell all of their friends and family, I did see Bloody Mary. I was terrified. And then all of their friends start doing it, and some of them get terrified, and others will remain skeptical and say, I didn't see anything. But some of them will see something out of the corner of their eye, or a floorboard creaks, or they see a bat, or something, and in their minds it just completely spooks them. That's sort of how ghosts and a lot of the paranormal stuff really has worked. That people tend to be fairly open to spooky suggestion. But I'm not saying that I'm a complete skeptic. I do believe there is some truth to some of these things, because I've had weird experiences of my own. I just don't claim that people should automatically believe that story, and I don't believe that ghosts or spirits or whatever you want to call them have any form of intelligence. I don't believe that they're malevolent because they're incapable of being malevolent. That's about all. Peace out.